Welcome to episode 203 of the Brainy Business, understanding the psychology of why people buy. In today's episode, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Jay Maddock, a professor and researcher in environmental and occupational health. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. While I was recently in College Station visiting the Human Behavior Lab, my interview with its director, Dr. Marco Palma, was last week. Dr. Maddock had come by to chat with us for a bit. I had not met him before, but in learning about his work and research, it was clear that we had to do an interview. Thankfully, I had my equipment with me, and he had some spare time to talk about some of the incredibly cool stuff he and his team are doing there at Texas A&M. A little about Dr. Maddock. He is a professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health at the School of Public Health at Texas A&M University. And he's also the co-director of the Center for Health and Nature, and he serves on the Brazos County Board of Health. Not to mention, he's editor-in-chief of the Journal of Healthy Eating and Active Living. Oh, and he's authored more than 130 scientific articles, which have been cited more than 5,000 times. Plus, his research has been featured on or in the Today Show, BBC, CNN, Eating Well, Prevention, and Good Housekeeping, and he's given lectures around the world. This isn't even all of his bio, but I wanted to let you know a little bit about his awesomeness before you hear about the cool stuff he's doing. One quick housekeeping item before we jump into the interview. I want to be sure you know there are show notes for this episode with links to all sorts of related content, including past episodes like last week's with Dr. Palma, related books, articles, and more. And those are within the show notes for the episode, which are waiting for you in the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/203. Those already on the Brainy Business list got a direct link from me in the email you receive every Friday. Not on the list yet? Simply sign up for any freebie at thebrainybusiness.com and you'll be automatically added. The freebie for this episode is the first chapter of my award-winning book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And if you already have the book, in which case, thank you, you'll also be automatically added to the list when you get your copy of the free PDF companion workbook. Both are housed in our free behavioral economics community called the Be Thoughtful Revolution. There's a link to join that global community in those show notes as well. Now let's get right to it. Dr. Jay Maddock, welcome to the Brainy Business Podcast.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Yeah. And as I said in our little intro section here to the episode, I met you like 10 minutes ago here at the lab, but was hearing a little bit about what you were working on and realized we definitely had to have a more formal conversation and everybody needed to hear it. So I will definitely be learning along with our audience here, but if you can tell a little bit about your background and who you are and what you do.
Sure. Thank you so much. Really appreciate being here today. My PhD is in experimental psychology. I went to the University of Rhode Island back in the 1990s. And at the time, we were really looking at developing expert systems for health behavior change. So based on theoretical models, like the social cognitive theory or transcendental model, how do we change people's behavior? And from there, got into public health at the University of Hawaii. And so have been doing that. And then recently at Texas A&M for the last 7 years, mostly working now in how do we get people into nature and natural environments and what the health and healing effects of those environments are.
Yeah. And we definitely have, I know a lot of people that listen to the show that are interested in behavioral nudges in that way. And so being able to help people to make healthier, better choices. And we also end up talking a lot about stress and cognitive load. And as there's a, great resignation and people looking for these, something different or better, you know? And so I think there's a lot of learning definitely that you'll be able to share today. And knowing not everybody is working in a corporate space, but we have people in public policy and all sorts that are listening from around the world. So tell a little bit about just some of the research that you're doing or some that's really interesting. I know you were talking about some cool stuff with VR that you're going to be doing here soon.
Yeah, so we're really, looking at how natural environments change health. And so what's really interesting is we've had all our traditional health promotion recommendations for decades, right? Eat healthy diet, be physically active, don't smoke. And since I've been in the field in the mid-90s, we really haven't had anything new come out. Mm-hmm. And that's what's neat. I've gotten into this area of, wow, spending time in nature really changes your health. But it's a lot like where physical activity was in the 90s, where we knew it's good for you, but we didn't know how much and when and where and for whom. And so a lot of what we're trying to understand now is what is the appropriate dose of nature, and then how can we use some of the theoretical models to get more people into nature. And so, for example, one study that we're looking at right now is healthcare workers, right? So we know with the pandemic, we've seen such huge burnout in healthcare workers. And so we're taking doctors and nurses in the ICU and the emergency room, and we're taking them out for a long weekend in nature. We're going to do something called forest bathing, which pretty much is mindfulness in nature. So we'll take people out and really experience their senses. Put your phones away, feel the wind on your face, look at the blade of grass, really, become fully engaged in this. And then bring them back into their healthcare setting. And we're going to measure cortisol, heart rate variability, blood pressure, and then some of the burnout scales to see if we can actually reduce levels of burnout in these people.
Yeah. And then to compare with maybe some virtual stuff, like you were talking about how that nature has impacts on, like you were just saying, blood pressure and stress and things like that. But then not knowing exactly what aspects of nature it is. So can you share a little bit about maybe how you're thinking about looking at this in the lab?
Yeah, it's neat. It's, we have our 5 senses and which ones are important. So one of the earliest studies was actually a faculty member here, Roger Ehrlich, was at Texas A&M, and he looked at hospital rooms. And patients either had a view of nature out their window or a view of a parking lot. And he compared them, and the ones with the nature view had less post-op complications, less pain, and were released earlier than those with a view of the parking lot. So that was, wow, that's just sight, right? And so you're like, okay, so that's just a piece of nature. And so what's cool about virtual reality is it lets us break the senses up. I can do a study where you just have sight, or you just have sound, or you just have smell, or even if we have a breeze blowing on you, right? I can control the senses. We hope we're not doing too much tasting of nature, but the rest of them for sure. And then we can look at what combination is important and what are the actual physiological effects on people's health.
Yeah. And then that could translate for business or in a healthcare system of being able to just even the extension of what you were just talking about, making sure that patient rooms have whatever the aspects are. Is it the sound of birds chirping being something that's helpful while someone's recovering, or,
Yeah, trying to figure out what in nature we need. I mean, we know when people are in a hospital room or even when we're at work all day, we really can't send them out to spend time in nature too much. And so what's the essential pieces? And certainly when people are working more and more in cubicles, they don't have window views, how can we change that? There's a theory called attention restoration theory, which pretty much says that you go throughout the day and you wear down your attention. I think we've all felt that in the afternoon. And so they took a group of people out and they had them walk in nature for 15 minutes and then come back. And what they found is they got full attention restoration rather than spending the time in a break room having a cup of coffee. If we can get people into natural environments, if businesses can create green spaces that are nearby nature, we might have a lot more productive workforce, kind of that late in the day, just with that recharge of nature.
Yeah. And so I know we were talking too about, maybe there's the beach room. Like, so for me, if I like to go to the beach, but someone else likes to be in the woods, or you want to experience the rainforest room, or, whatever that might be, but you could have it all be, if it is through a virtual reality aspect, that you could sort of choose your experience and go kind of be immersed in the space.
people like different types of nature. And I think that's one thing that there's not been a lot of research on, is how do we match people to the natural environment that they enjoy. And so for myself, I grew up in Rhode Island and I lived in Hawaii. I am a ocean person through and through, and living in Central Texas, I don't get there very often.
Yeah.
And so, can I dial up my preferred nature through virtual reality? And does that have a more beneficial effect on my health? We believe it will, but we're going to have to test it in the next year or so.
Yeah. And so please do also tell about this 360-degree treadmill.
Yeah, so it's one of the coolest things. It's a thing called an omnidirectional treadmill. And so what you do is you wear a vest that's connected to a hook that holds you up so you're not going to fall. And they're actually meant for gaming originally. So you can run at full speed, away from monsters. But we're hoping that you can walk through a forest or do a mountain hike. And really the idea of virtual reality is presence, right? So the more that we feel that we're in the environment, the more effect it has on our physiology. And so what we want to do is create an environment that really, really is engaging and connected. And one of the other theories that's cool with nature is people have hypothesized that part of the healing effect of nature is awe, right? Mm. And it's a hard thing to measure, right? But what we want to do in virtual reality is compare what we call high awe environments. So you go to the Grand Canyon, Grand Tetons, some of these amazing things, waterfalls, and we compare that to a simple walk down a wooded path and see, is it really the awe that makes the difference, or is it just being in a space that's green and calm? And so there's so many questions that we can answer through virtual reality that would be difficult to do in person. We can't send everybody to the Grand Tetons, but we can get them with a headset.
Right, with all the equipment hooked up to them and everything that you're able to learn there. But then, I really love being able to say, well, this type of a sound has this type of an impact. And then as you're designing rooms into the future, just if we're thinking about for companies, if they're wanting to use this to help their employees to have a place to go recharge. We talk about, return to work and the benefits, and people do like to be at home. And so why would I come in to work? But if you get to go and spend some time in this really cool virtual space where you're able to go experience something new every day, like I'm going to go out to the pyramids today or whatever it is, and you're actually there. I personally going to the gym and doing the stair stepper is terrible. It is unpleasant until they have, the one at my gym has had the one where you're able to say, I'm going to climb to the top of the pyramid at Giza or the Leaning Tower of Pisa or whatever it is. And then it feels more, okay, I'm halfway there. I can keep going, right?
You have a goal.
Right.
It's goal setting, of course, right? And and I think, making environments immersive and interesting is important for people. And hopefully also igniting their interest in actually being in some of these natural places. I think that always best for us is going to be being in real nature. And to me, VR is an incredible adjunct to that and a way to kind of get folks, especially folks with mobility issues. So we have a faculty member we work with. He takes care of his sister who was in a car accident and is quadriplegic. Mm-hmm. This is one of the only ways she can experience nature. And so that's really important for us. I think for folks that live in areas that are dangerous, being able to do that. And then we've become really, really interested in the last year or two on the remote worker. Right. And so we know that as our workforces move remote, the quality and access to nature is very different depending on where people live, their income levels, et cetera. And, can we supplement some of that with VR or other things? We're just launching a study right now just to quantify nature exposure among 2,000 remote workers to say, what do we know? Is this a problem? Is this not a problem? Because for you were there 10 hours a day, you're now there 20 in the same setting. That's magnifying any deficiencies we had in our health are now twice as likely.
Right. Even where we feel like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have my commute anymore because that was such, I'm having to be focused on driving. I have more time to do what I want to do. But even that was a tiny exposure to nature, right? From inside your car, you could at least see something that's different than your couch.
And if you live in an urban environment, in an apartment in a city where there's not a lot of nearby green space, you might not be getting any green space. And so, I think working with businesses, both the in-person and the remote, to say, how can we integrate nature? And what's beautiful about nature is that it can come in so many different ways. Little tips. It can be your screensaver. It can be a plant. And as we talked about, with site being important is it can be a fake plant, right? And that seems to still have an effect on people, right? So if you're like, oh, I'm going to kill everything, even a fake plant can make a difference. And so how can we integrate nature into our surroundings and environment is important, with the idea of the kind of micro and macro nature. And so micro is that plant or the screensaver. Macro is spending the weekend hiking. And they seem to have different effects on our health, from kind of immediate stress reduction to more changes in immunofunction. They've seen changes in natural killer cell activity, which is our cancer-fighting immune system, for people that spent a long weekend forest bathing, so 3 nights in the forest. And that made this huge difference. It lasted a month later. So really incredible effects from spending time in nature, but, kind of blending the micro and the macro together.
Yeah. And so I was getting some insights from Dr. Palma on the work that you're doing, some of it together, maybe with the Human Behavior Lab, or just that you all have been talking about your work, and that you have some stuff that you're looking at with tourism and sustainability. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Dr. Palm and Dr. Seuss and myself, and yes, her name is Dr. Seuss, have been really looking at the effect of travel and nature. And I think so many times when we get a vacation, we want to go to some beautiful natural spot, but we also have an effect on the environment. So we've been particularly looking around coral reef protection, everything from the sunblock that you wear to donation behavior. So we expose people to either a high fear or low fear appeal, and a high hope and low hope. And so we actually just got the data in this week. We haven't taken a look at it yet, but we really want to see what's the best way to increase donations to protect coral reefs. We're seeing bleachings throughout the world. And, if these go away, then people aren't going to go to these sites anymore. And so we've lost something along with the animal colonies and everything else that survive along the reef.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really interesting. I was thinking about it from a business perspective of being able to also earn money and reducing the actual feet on the ground at the place, right? So there is something, if you want people to be able to go for the aspect of the tourism, that's important for those communities. And, is there something with the virtual reality work that you're doing where somebody could make a donation to the location if they don't go in person, so you get to save money, but you experience it and it goes to protect the space? Could be something interesting in the not so distant future.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think there's places where, we do want to go and experience them directly, and there's places that we want protected and offsite. So, having lived in Hawaii for so many years, we expect the tourism around the main islands. And the Northwest Hawaiian Islands have been protected as a wildlife refuge, and they certainly should be. But the ability to kind of virtually tour some of those would be really cool, because they're untouched, and they're going to look very different than the ones where there's, hundreds of tourists a day, and unfortunately, stepping on things and
picking things up.
Yeah, and just affecting the natural environment. I think people would love to see what this looks like when it's really almost untouched by humans.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a way that can be done that is helping to then preserve more areas that could be a really good, charitable contribution, gratitude, gifting of the, all that good stuff.
Yeah, because I think that's the biggest thing with health and nature is that it doesn't work without conservation, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of our partners for my center is Texan by Nature, which is a foundation started by Laura Bush here in Texas to preserve outdoor space and work with businesses to work in conservation. And that's been really important for us, because we know we can love nature as much as possible. We can also love it to death. And so we do have to protect stuff that we do have for the planet and the climate.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything else that you're working on that you're excited about right now?
One of the other things we've been working on is really looking at some of the behavioral theories that we use and how we adopt these to increase people's time in nature. There's a large gap among people with less education across racial and ethnic divides, and across income of people that spend time in nature. And so looking at the social cognitive theory and how we kind of work to nudge people more into nature. And, when we ask people, do you think nature is good for you? Almost everybody says yes, right? Of course it is. Then why don't you spend more time in nature? Well, it's really low on my priority list. So I don't think people really realize the actual benefits of being in nature. And then if they do, a lot like physical activity, time, weather, those kind of things can really reduce people's time. So really trying to look at how we use psychology and behavioral economics to increase people's time in nature.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I am so fascinated. I can't wait to see the research come out here soon, and hopefully some, businesses that are looking to do more in this space. So I would say, as a call out, to anybody who's listening, from a company maybe where you're looking to invest in something different that could help your employees to be able to have these benefits for their health, and maybe that expands your office in a cool way and can be part of some research. I'm guessing that Dr. Maddock would be interested in hearing from you about possibly doing some research and seeing what can be done in this space. So with that in mind, what is the best way for anyone to contact you and learn more?
Sure. You can reach me through my email, which is my last name, Maddock, MADDOCK, @tamu.edu. And I'd be delighted to talk to anyone that wants to get more nature.
Awesome. And I'm guessing you recruit for studies here in the kind of central Texas area often as well, right?
We do. Actually, we work with Dr. Palma's lab. And so if you are on the list for his studies in behavioral economics, we'll also be using that as our recruitment for our virtual reality studies.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. I will, of course, have the email written out. So actually, we don't write out our email addresses and put them in the show notes because I care about your inbox and I don't want you to get spammed by the internet. So everybody who's listening, you can write that down, and you can also contact me, Melina, at thebrainybusiness.com, and I could get you in touch with Dr. Maddock if there were more conversations as well. So thank you again so much for joining me. It has been really fascinating to learn about all the great work that you're doing, and please do keep it up and keep nature, even better than it is today. We'll keep moving back, I guess, as we move forward.
Thanks, Lynn. I appreciate it.
Thank you again to Dr. Jay Maddock for joining me on the show today. What got your brain buzzing in today's conversation? I think the connection between nature and our health is really amazing, and personally hope to get a chance to be a participant in some of their studies with this omnidirectional treadmill and anything else in the future. I will make sure to let Dr. Maddock know when I'm going to be in College Station next. I had the joy of talking to him beyond the interview, and the idea that spending time in nature can help you have cancer-fighting benefits and reduce stress and so much other goodness, it really does help show why work-life balance is so important. And I love that they're digging in to see what aspects are most important to get those health benefits. Of course, getting out into real live nature and experiencing it is going to be the best thing. But what about those who can't? This could be by physical limitation or geographic issues or financial, that you can't be traveling all the time. Should they be doomed to a life without those healthy benefits? Of course not. And the idea that companies could theoretically have these amazing nature experience rooms that will give their employees healthy benefits throughout the day, and you could take the metaverse to a whole new level, it's really amazing. And I can't wait to see and hear about all the awesome things I know are going to be coming out of his lab in the coming years. And as I said, if you're interested in being part of some of that research at your company, definitely reach out to him. I don't put email addresses typed out in the show notes because I care about people's inboxes and spammers are real. So here it is again, if you didn't write it down before. It's Maddock, MADDOCK, at TAMU, like Texas A&M University, TAMU.edu. And of course, you can always email me, Melina at thebrainybusiness.com, or send a message through the form on my website. However you get to me, I would be happy to put you in touch with Jay. And speaking of the show notes, just a reminder, they're waiting for you within the app you're listening to or at thebrainybusiness.com/203. And there are links to all sorts of really great extra information waiting there for you. And if you enjoy the experience I've provided here for you, will you share about it? That could mean leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen, sharing this episode or any other with a friend who you think would find value in the insights, or even hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate it, and you. Thank you again to Dr. Jay Maddock for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Next week, Sam Tatum from Ogilvy, UK is here to talk about his amazing new book, evolutionary ideas. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.